Juiceheads, welcome to Smackdown Pre Game. And I think I might have just fucked myself when I went live because I'm not sure about the volume on my TV. See, I always have what I call a YouTube verifying device on just to make sure my broadcast is going smoothly. There it is. There's the echo. So, sounds like we're going good. So, let me take care of that with the phone. Don't you love technology? I could just do that with my fucking phone. Anywho, welcome to Smackdown Pre-Game. So basically, when I'm going to talk wrestling, you got to think outside the box, right? There's already 1,000,001 wrestling podcasts out there, and wrestling, like I said, on Raw Pre-Game is how I got into podcasting in the first place, or interested into listening to podcasts, I should say, because it took me till 2020 to actually start a podcast. But yeah, so I figured that really there's no wrestling podcasts that go on before the show that I'm aware of. There could be. I'm not saying there's not, but as far as I know, this is a pretty original idea. And it's not going to necessarily be every Monday night Raw pregame, every Friday night SmackDown pregame. There might be AEW pregames. There might be NXT pregames. There might be pay-per-view pregames. I'll totally do a WrestleMania pregame. That's a no fucking brainer. WrestleMania 8 is when I started watching wrestling. So I am a 29-year fan almost of the industry. And started out WWF only, and then after the acquisition of 2001, really had no choice. And I would watch TNA occasionally. I was always a fan of Christian, so we're actually going to talk about him on this show today. I have some notes here. Shit, we're going to talk about a little more organized than Monday, but I could just talk about wrestling off the top of my head for any extended period of time, whether I have a guest or not, because I do have a potential partner for this show, but it's up to him whether or not he wants to do it. Right? I can't make someone do it, but it's always better to have a partner, I think. But solo shows are fun too, and I could talk fucking wrestling and share my knowledge with you guys. And I look at it from a different way. I try to be positive about the product, although I don't find much positivity all the time watching it. But it's okay. I mean, but sometimes I think too, as wrestling fans, and as now I can call myself a wrestling podcaster as of this week. You got to start somewhere. I think sometimes we do tend to overthink shit and maybe overanalyze shit, and sometimes you should just take it for what it is. It's fucking. I mean, sometimes the WWE does have balls calling themselves entertainment and having entertainment in their name. Because a lot of the times, quite frankly, it's more cringeworthy than entertaining. But I'm trying to be up on the product. I'm trying to be a little more positive about it. And because there's a lot of other podcasts that, quite frankly, just shit on wrestling. And again, there's a lot of stuff that deserves to be shit on. Don't get me wrong. But I, like, for example, I think just the existence. I also want a beer. The one person watching, I owe you a beer for having my volume on my phone. For example, just the existence of AEW is great. I mean, the existence of TNA was great. Great for the boys, as they say, and great for the fans. The problem is TNA was never real competition, and the problem is AEW is not even really competition. Although I think Head and Shoulders, they put on a way better product week to week, and I really was kind of sour on both WWE and AEW, and haven't really been watching a tremendous amount. But because I wanted to do these shows, it got me back into kind of forcing myself to have to watch it, and I'm glad. And again, I mean, this is 2021. We all have DVRs or YouTube TV or whatever you watch it on. You could skip through the commercials. You could skip through the cringeworthy segments because there's cringe on both brands, or whatever you want to call them, federations. I guess one federation has 3 brands, and the other one's just a mono branded federation. But yeah, I am enjoying the AEW a lot more, and I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And as a matter of fact, they need to spend a little less time airing out their grievances with Vince McMahon on their show. Like, focus on you. No need to focus on the past. No need to focus on the competitor, if you want to call them. I don't think or believe they're in competition, but that's just my take on it. But I actually did have some topics. I find myself taking notes when I watch any wrestling content as of last Monday, because I came in and totally just freestyled the whole fucking half hour, and I wanted to do an hour tonight, and I will, just like on Monday night, I will drop off at 7:59, so you can just tune into Smackdown live and hopefully enjoy it, because this is it. This is the last round before the go home Raw and the go home Smackdown for WrestleMania. I don't know if they're inserting any NXT into Mania. They did last year with Rhea Ripley, which is kind of cool. I mean, if you're going to have it be a third brand as opposed to a WWE Network exclusive show, for people that are preparing to get called up, then quite frankly, there should be 1 or 2 matches, especially on a 2-night card. There should be 1 or 2 or 3 matches represented by NXT. And NXT usually, I haven't really watched it since they went to USA Network, because I just think it hasn't been the same since the first few years of it. But I'm going to try to start watching it again, because Wednesday nights I watch I don't even watch it on Wednesday night usually. If I'm doing an episode of Uncommon Sense or whatever I'm doing, I usually end up watching it from the DVR. But yeah, that's the way it goes. Actually, Raw is the show, just because like Monday nights, that's like the thing to do. That's the only show I really usually only watch live. I will watch SmackDown tonight, but I think I'm doing a podcast at 8:30. So that's sort of going to take away from watching SmackDown. That's okay, because I have a DVR, like I said. But anyway, I did watch some of SmackDown from a couple weeks ago, and I guess it was post Fastlane SmackDown, and I guess Daniel Bryan got screwed. I didn't watch Fastlane. Most months I don't even know when there's a pay-per-view. I really only care about the big 4. To me, if you're going to do a brand split, which they claim they're doing, to me it's a soft brand split. The brands need to have their own pay-per-views, or it's not really a brand split, and then have them come together, and you have the best of for the big 4. And for God's sakes, stop doing gimmick pay-per-views. Stop naming pay-per-views after a match and force-feeding an angle to end it in a certain way just because you know Hell in a Cell is in October or whenever the fuck it is. Can we stop doing that? Please? Can we at least not make it as fake as you present it? I don't know. I know the word fake offends people in the profession, so I try not to say that word. But can we please just not have a pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell and force feed an angle to climax at that pay-per-view in a Hell in a Cell match? And by the way, now let's have a women's Hell in a Cell match on the same night that happens to coincide. Let these things happen naturally. Let them play out naturally. I remember in the Beloved Attitude Era, there was an Inferno match one time, but the name of the pay-per-view wasn't Inferno match. The Inferno match was the payoff of the angle that led to the Inferno match. Hence It was the main event of the pay-per-view, but the pay-per-view was not named after the fucking match. And it wasn't year after year after year. This month we will have an Inferno match pay-per-view. That's the best example I could think of off the top of my head. But anyway, I guess Daniel Bryan got screwed at Fastlane. Brett screwed Brett, right? So he came out whining and complaining on SmackDown and protesting. Haven't we seen this before? And again, I'm not trying to be sour on the product. I'm trying to find positives in it. I like Daniel Bryan. I'm not sure if we would personally be friends ever, but I like him as a performer. I dug the Yes Movement. But I dug it when he was with AJ Lee and he would be like, AJ, shut up and stuff like that. Let's talk about this for a second because this is serious. They botched the real Yes Movement, which was in 2012. WrestleMania in Miami, which I believe was WrestleMania 28. Daniel Bryan came in as the World Heavyweight Champion and Sheamus bro kicked him in a match that I think was less time than Hunter and Warrior from WrestleMania 12. That was when Bryan was really on fire. He was a heel, and he was really over as a heel. And they had Sheamus squash him. And then the following WrestleMania, which I went to because it was at MetLife Stadium, I heard the original plans were to do Daniel Bryan and Sheamus again. I think in the pre-show. What are you doing? You're just taking this guy's momentum and killing it. And then all of a sudden, WrestleMania 30, because CM Punk walked out, left, took his ball and went home, whatever you want to call it. Now they push Bryan to the top. But he kind of was already at the top on the lower brand. Because at that point, at WrestleMania 28, the World Heavyweight Championship meant nothing. It was probably lower than a diminished Intercontinental Championship. And it wasn't unusual for WrestleMania to open up with a World Heavyweight title match at that point, and probably still wouldn't be. Or the Universal, whatever. I mean, now that they created their own Universal title, because the World Heavyweight Championship, remember, was the big gold belt that essentially came from another organization. So that was always going to be the number 2 belt, no matter what brand that belt was on. And so, I mean, their own created Universal title, they're probably going to hold it with a little more prestige than having it open up and be a curtain jerker match. See, an opening match, in my opinion, is supposed to set the tone for the whole card. And there's some really goddamn good WrestleMania opening matches. If you want to call them curtain jerkers, call them curtain jerkers all you want. Just think about WrestleMania 10, Brett versus Owen. It's one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history. That fucking thing opened up WrestleMania 10. And again, even I thought Daniel Bryan versus Hunter at WrestleMania 30 was a good opening match. And those matches actually have one thing in common. Those two matches have one thing in common. Both performers that won in those opening matches went on to the last match to win the belt. I'm sure I thought about that parallel before, but that's a fun, interesting fact, and those are offset by 20 years. But Brett versus Owen was a fucking awesome match from WrestleMania 10, and a lot of people make the argument that their match at SummerSlam 94 was even better. And it's tough, really. I don't know. Take your pick. And I think Hunter and Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30 actually told a good story. And I love the way that Hunter just fucking fucked up his leg at the end of that match. And just being a heel, sore loser, snapping out, which we're also going to talk about. I have it in my notes here. I love seeing stuff like that. Because what I hate the most is when the agents and the writers and the performers all forget that this is fucking pro wrestling, okay? It's supposed to, like, we know what it is as fans, right? So, like, just give us what we want. And for me personally, I love when people just, like, unnecessarily snap out and just go over the top trying to injure and hurt someone, especially when they have an important match later that night. And I do have to self-correct myself off the top of my head because Brett did not win that opening match. He was guaranteed the title match. So that's the one difference. Brett was guaranteed the title match against Yokozuna. So therefore, because he won the coin toss with Lex Luger, because they were co-winners of the Royal Rumble that year in '94, that forced Brett to have, because he won the coin toss, but he had to have suitable competition, because they decided that both Luger and Brett would have a title shot at WrestleMania 10. So in a way, it was like a little bit of a tournament, except the match with Owen was like a warm-up match or tune-up match, whatever you want to call it, or like a scrimmage. But it counted. Big win for Owen. And then Luger got screwed by referee Mr. Perfect, special guest referee. And Yoko walked out with the belt from that match and then dropped it to Brett. And really the match that stole that show arguably was this guy, HBK and Razor, in the ladder match. That was a great fucking match. But Brett and Owen and Razor and Shawn, I mean, that was what WrestleMania 10 was really all about. And it was also the first WrestleMania with Hulk Hogan. And I remember watching it live on pay-per-view and just like praying to God that Hulk Hogan would have been one of the special guest referees. And then later that year, you see him sign with WCW. And shout out to the Podfather, Don Tony, who I was watching a little bit earlier today. And he was talking about some of the most surreal moments he's seen as a wrestling fan. And I have to agree 100% when Hulk Hogan, seeing him signing with WCW and seeing that parade that they had at, I guess it was at MGM at Disney World, that was extremely surreal to see that. And to see Hogan in WCW was just crazy. Anywho, so yeah, back to Dan O'Brien on a recent episode of SmackDown. So I guess he whined and complained and sour pooed in the ring until he got what he wanted, and I guess inserted him into the match at WrestleMania with Edge and Roman Reigns, which is fine. I have no problems with that. I just have a problem with the way they did it. Like, these are grown-ass men. These are supposed to be real-life comic book people. You know what I mean? They're supposed to be like real-life superheroes. And superheroes don't pout and whine and complain and sit in the ring until they get what they want. And yes, Stone Cold Steve Austin did something similar once on Raw, but he was like a badass about it. And it was believable, and it just wasn't recycled bad writing. And also keep in mind, didn't Dan O'Brien already hijack Raw back in the Yes Movement era leading up to WrestleMania 30? Again, to me, the real Yes Movement was the unnamed Yes Movement of 2012 when he had that first run with the World Heavyweight Championship, which I think was the best Dan O'Brien. And they totally squandered that, and that was sort of akin to how Warner Brothers hates Zack Snyder so much with handling the DC properties. It's like, why did they even hire the guy in the first place to make Man of Steel and lay out the plans for the DCEU? And then he ended up getting his Snyder Cut released because of Warner Max, right? And sort of the same thing. Sort of the same situation. But they were 2 years too late. I mean, Dan O'Brien was white hot in 2012, and they totally fucking botched that. And that's the problem. For a company that says that they have the pulse of the fans and they do everything for the fans, I'm not so sure about that. And that's what, again, I hate to be negative. I'm not trying to be negative about the product, but that's honestly the way it is. That's the way I see it. Now, Raw last Monday, 4 nights ago. Pretty fun show for Raw. I didn't find myself fast forwarding as much as I usually do, which is a good thing. And these should step up pre-WrestleMania. Okay. So we saw the Hurt Business break up. And again, this is not a recap show. This is just a me rambling about wrestling fucking show. But we saw the Hurt Business break up. And they're still doing the goddamn motherfucking shaky cam and half a second cut to this camera, half a second later cut to the other camera, half a second later cut to this camera angle, zoom in, zoom out, shake, cut. Are these people watching their own product? Do they understand that's like physically nauseating to present your product like that? First of all, as a viewer, you lose space and context of what the fuck you're trying to watch. And second of all, it's just really goddamn annoying. And I'll always remember, like, with the Shield, they were so flagrant with it. Like, when the Shield would beat people down when they were, like, a relatively new thing. But yeah, just for the love of God, please stop doing this. This is one of the reasons why I like to go back and watch the old stuff so much. They had a hard cam. They had several other cameras. But there was time in between the cuts, and they didn't shake the fucking cameras. It just... And they didn't do the zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. Yo, you need to understand people are trying to watch this. Just stop. Please. For the love of God. If this reaches anybody that has any pull, just please stop with the WWE, at least. And that's one of the reasons why, hands down, I have so much more fun watching AEW, which we'll get to. So what else happened on the most recent episode of Raw? I noticed that Matt Riddle, which is his real name, legitimate UFC fighter, former UFC fighter, he's just Riddle now. Why? Why do they constantly take either first names or last names away from people? What is their fascination with people just being a mononym? I'm not saying you can't have a mononym, but like I remember the first one I can think of off the top of my head when they started doing this was Adrian Neville. Then they just called him Neville. Why is that necessary, to take away the guy's first name and just pretend like he doesn't even have a first name? I don't get it. Someone please explain this to me. And then Andrade Cien Almas just became Andrade. Why? I just don't understand. Makes no sense. And it's just stupid and it's irritating. And especially the fact that this guy, Matt Riddle, his real name is actually Matt Riddle. That's a shoot name. So why, for the love of God, can't you acknowledge that he has a first name and it's Matt? What's the big fucking deal? Like, I just want to explain to me why they think that makes things better. It's like when Apple or any app on your iPhone or whatever phone makes you upgrade the software. It usually never improves it. It's usually like really a downgrade. And like, for example, the Under Armour app on my phone that I use when I go out jogging, the most recent update actually adds steps to log and record your workout. Why would you want to add steps? If anything, an upgrade would be to take away steps. So I just don't understand that. But what was funny, though, and again, like I said, I'm going to try to be as positive as possible on this show about the product. But I thought it was pretty fucking funny that Sheamus just hit him with the scooter. Yeah, because it's just like, hey, I'm Matt Riddle, I'm on a scooter, and it's like, I'm Sheamus, I'm gonna take the scooter and just fucking annihilate you with it. Oh man. And did you see Bad Bunny's right hand? That was pretty cool. You know, Bad Bunny, you could tell, probably is an actual fan. So I thought that was good. And I talked about that Monday night. I'm glad he's working with The Miz. I think The Miz is probably a great candidate if you have to pick somebody on the roster to have a guy that's an outsider come in with, like, who's, like I said, who's a fan, which is a great start, but he's got little to no experience doing this. So I think The Miz is a great candidate to work with a person like that and maximize it and make the most out of it. So I am looking forward to that at Mania. I think they're doing a pretty good job setting that up. And then just my one last thing from Raw this past Monday. I have a little bit of a gripe with Asuka. And not her personally. I love her. I think she's married, which sucks for me because I'm a single guy. But back in the day, when we had either people that were shoot or by gimmick foreign and didn't speak English, they were allowed to have this thing called a manager. And the manager would be their mouthpiece and do the talking for them. Or they would speak their native language and the manager would translate. Perfect example. I was talking about WrestleMania 10 and Yokozuna. He had Mr. Fuji. Was Yokozuna really Japanese? No, we all know that. But he pretended to speak something. And Fuji would sometimes translate, but Fuji was his mouthpiece. Instead of making Asuka say cringeworthy lines in bad English, can we just please let her have a manager that talks for her? Is that a crazy idea? Apparently. So, and I love like, I think she's too good of an in-ring performer to be coming out and cutting these awful promos, and it's not even her fault. I blame this 110% on the micromanagement of the WWE, which is what that's one thing that really does sour me about the product, is the micromanagement. Let the wrestlers be wrestlers, which I'd like to talk a little bit about AEW now, speaking of that, because the one thing you have to give AEW credit for, whether you like them or not, again, I'm going to compare it to Zack Snyder's Justice League, whether you consider them to have a toxic fan base or not, they let the wrestlers just be wrestlers, okay? And I got to tell you, one of the biggest differences between the WWE and AEW, I feel like, is that AEW tries to cram as much as possible into that 2-hour time slot and deliver as much as they can every week. Whereas the WWE, with a 3-hour Raw, an hour of NXT, and 2 hours of SmackDown, it feels like they're trying to fill time. And that's a big difference. And it shows. And you can totally notice it. Just like Monday night, I felt like I ran out of time. I felt like I couldn't cram enough because I had so much fun doing Raw pregame, and already a half hour almost went by on this show. Because I just, this is my thing. So I'm glad to be doing finally a show about it. But yeah, I mean, we just saw Christian in the Royal Rumble a few months ago. I guess the WWE only wanted to use him for things like that as an in-ring performer. I guess they had him doing pre-show panels and They had the Edge and Christian show on the network, and which was actually pretty good. I watched it. But Christian still wants to work, and Christian still can work. So he's back now as Christian Cage in AEW, and he's got his old generic TNA music. It's like the generic version of his WWE song, which is cool. But it's actually done well. I actually have it on my iPod. He was one of my reasons, if I ever did watch TNA, to watch TNA. Because I've just always been a big fan of Christian. I thought him and Y2J stole the show at WrestleMania 20, which I was at live. And that's like the number one match I watched from that night. Nothing, I mean, that was also the return of the Dead Man, Undertaker. It was the last time we saw The Rock until like 7 years later. Or 6 years later. 7 years later. And so yeah, those are the top three things that stand out to me about WrestleMania 20. And well, and then you want to name another one? Benoit, obviously. The way it ended. And honest, I was there. Another thing that stuck out to me too, speaking of Benoit, Guerrero. I couldn't believe how over Guerrero and Benoit were. I mean, that place was electric and absolutely erupted for both of them. And you know, the match with Eddie and Kurt wasn't all that bad either. Either one of those championship matches, in my opinion, could have closed out the show. Because, I mean, Kurt had closed out WrestleMania the year before that. And Hunter's closed out countless WrestleManias. And even HBK. HBK's closed out at least, what, 4? At least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. Probably 4, at least. 4 that I know for sure. You have, and keep in mind, he could have closed out WrestleMania 11, but they had Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam close it out. But he was in the title match at WrestleMania 11. But in terms of being the last match on the show, which is like what everybody really cares about, he closed out 12. He closed out 14. He closed out 13 technically on commentary. He showed up all drugged up. It was fucking awesome. Go back and watch WrestleMania 13 and skip Brett versus Austin, which is one of the greatest matches of all time. Just watch HBK come do an entrance in his like normal street clothes, all on whatever drugs he was on, and do his commentary all fucking drugged up. It is great. There's no better HBK than I call him DU-HBK. Drugged up HBK. It was awesome. I know he really regrets it now, but it was, talk about entertaining. That was fucking entertaining. But as a performer, he closed out 12, closed out 14, closed out 20, and closed out 23 with Cena. But arguably also talking about Y2J stealing the show, I thought HBK and Y2J stole the show at WrestleMania 19. So, in my opinion, Y2J stole the show 2 years in a row. And I love what he's doing now. I love what he's doing now in AEW. Totally love it. And that first promo he cut on the first episode of AEW, I thought was like, I mean, he just, talk about a guy with just a high acumen for the business that just totally gets it. That's Y2J. I'll always call him Y2J, even though that's not like his thing anymore. I'm still getting emails for his rock and wrestling cruise, which great idea. I really wanted to go last year. I couldn't because of work and finances or what have you, but I can't imagine for the life of me how he's going to do one of those this year or next year. I think it's an awesome, innovative idea. And what's funny about Y2J, he's never ever going to be on anybody's Mount Rushmore, right? It's always going to be Hogan, Austin, Rock, Cena, probably. And I don't even know if he's on the second tier. The second tier, you have probably Taker, Shawn, Brett, Hunter, Warrior, Savage, Andre. And, he really should. Very underrated guy, in my opinion. Just totally gets it. Super entertaining. And he's pushing 50 and can still fucking work. And to bring it back to Christian, god damn, is this guy in good shape? He can't be too far apart in age from Jericho. And he's more shredded than I've ever seen him and leaner than I've ever seen him. And so, yeah, I caught his debut match on AEW with Kaz. And it was just a fun fucking match. And what I really appreciated about this match, there were no commercial breaks. They showed you the whole match without a commercial break. And it was just a fun fucking match. And that's what as a wrestling fan, that's what I want. I just want to have fun watching the goddamn show. I don't want it to be a pain. I don't want it to be an obligation. And I don't want to have to feel like I have to fast forward. Which is, again, a big problem I have with the WWE. There's so many things that they make me feel like I have to fast forward. Because just talk about douche chills and cringe, right? Here's another thing that struck me from watching AEW. And I was sort of doing some other stuff when I was watching it, so I wasn't always with my remote in my hand. So I didn't fast forward through all the commercials. I saw more fucking John Cena commercials for a show he's doing on TNT. And they would, I guess, deliberately put those commercials right before AEW would come back on. So I'm getting more John Cena watching AEW than the WWE right now. And it looks like he's not coming back for Mania unless it's going to be some sort of a surprise cameo or something. But yeah, I just thought that was pretty funny. Something else I noticed on AEW, they kept calling Codey Rhodes. I thought that wasn't allowed. Which, by the way, I disagree with. Like, that's just stupid. Like, to just be called Cody. I just hate that. Unless it makes sense. Like, Hannibal. That's a good mononym. But if it's just like, Anthony. That's a stupid name for a wrestler. Just Anthony. If I was a wrestler, my name would be Juice Giorgio. Or even if it was just Juice, that could work. Because it's juice. Right? It's not like... Can you imagine if they did that to John Cena and it was just John? What? Coming to the ring. John! The fuck is that? And we can go on and on and on and on. But that, I don't know, it's just one of my pet peeves that they do. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was by accident or like on purpose, but they kept calling him like he was announced as Codey Rhodes. Someone said Codey Rhodes after the segment with him. So to me, that's a good thing. He should be allowed to be called Codey Rhodes. And what I did like to see too was his good friend QT Marshall. I talked earlier about people like snapping out. I love a good snap out in wrestling. I really do. And this guy went so over the top with it. And from an exhibition match. See, I just thought this was great stuff. I thought it was so entertaining. And I was listening but not watching, so I had to go back and rewind it and watch it. So that's the opposite of fast forwarding. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say, it was just the difference between AEW and the WWE. The WWE, it looks like people working. In AEW, it looks like performers having fun. And it comes across that way to me. And it feels way more fun to watch. And it's just a good thing that AEW even exists, and I hope they make it. I really do, because even though it's not competition, alternatives and other televised federations on major cable networks are a great thing. We need them. You know, when I was a kid, I hated WCW. They were like my mortal enemy. But I never realized how important they were until we hit the Attitude Era. And to me, one of the worst things that ever happened was Vince buying WCW. Because that was really a dark day for the wrestling industry, in my opinion, because it led to a lot of staleness and what we have now. So it's great we have an alternative, but they do need to stop airing out their grievances with Vince on their show. Just let it go. Focus on you. Focus on what you're doing now. I don't care about that stuff. And then the other thing I noticed that stuck out to me, well, first of all, we had an arcade match to close out the show. So how do you beat that? I mean, they were using a Mortal Kombat machine and whack-a-mole. So I did appreciate that. Rusev is in great shape. Dean Ambrose, or whatever, John Moxley, whatever you want to call him, cut a really nice promo, pre-recorded promo before his match. And that's the type of a promo that, as a 29-year wrestling fan, that's the kind of a promo I grew up with. That's the kind of a promo that you're not allowed to do right now in the WWE, because it's so scripted and it's so micromanaged that would never happen. And he really didn't say anything out of bounds or bad. It's just, it was off the cuff. And off the cuff is not allowed in Vince McMahon's playground. And I think that's a really bad thing for the business. You have to let these guys be their own creative too. You have to let them have their own input on their own shit. So that's all I really got for tonight. I mean, we could go over the Mania card, but I think I'm going to save that if I do a show Monday, or save it for my next show as we get closer to Mania. We have about 15 more minutes till SmackDown comes on, so I started the show at the wrong time. I should have started it at 7:15. Not 7, but you learn as you go. But enjoy SmackDown. We got a couple weeks out till Mania. Or not even. It's like a week from tomorrow. Night 1. So I'm looking forward to that. I always look forward to Mania, no matter what. So with that, thank you, Juiceheads, for tuning in and supporting the show. I really appreciate it. And we shall be back. Peace.